Tim Armstrong milked cows for a living. Like actual cows. At 5 a.m., in the rain, in rural New Zealand. Now he runs digital transformation at Mangrove Digital in Australia, and he's here to tell you something that's going to make half of ad tech choke on their oat milk lattes. Your shiny AI tools aren't going to save you. Your billion-dollar algorithm can't fix your leadership problem. And the people you just laid off? Yeah, they were the ones who actually knew what they were doing. This is the ADOTAT Show. I'm Pesach Lattin. Hold on tight because Tim's bringing farm kid common sense to an industry that desperately needs it.
ADOTAT Show, I'm Pesach Lattin. Today we've got Tim Armstrong, director at Mangrove Digital, joined us all the way from Australia. This guy went from milking cows on a farm to leading digital transformation. He's got some spicy takes on why people, not AI, are still what matters in ad tech. First of all, Tim, welcome to the show, and how are you doing, mate?
Good to be here. I'm doing very well, actually, and yesterday was actually my birthday, so I'm coming off
Happy birthday.
Thank you, of a day that was very special, made by my wife and my two little boys. So, I am going well at the moment. Fast start to the year, and work and life is very fun at the moment.
So you've been beating this drum about people being the secret sauce in ad tech innovation, while everyone else is genuflecting on the altar of AI like it's the second coming of the algorithm. You're out here saying, it's people, like you're channeling Soylent Green. So before we unpack this, I'd argue refreshingly saying this is a refreshingly sane perspective on humans matter in a world drunk on automation. So my question for you is, what do you mean that people are so important?
Look, I think as humans, and we'll start with the people factor, we can get really sidetracked and distracted by things that sound great and amazing. I think that for me, growing up on a dairy farm in rural New Zealand has really proven to me that above all else, humans are the cog in the engine, right? You can put all of the accessories and technology around that, but where we are right now is that I think AI is incredibly promising in terms of what it can do for businesses. But I think as humans, we are probably not so great at thinking about how we practically use that to enhance our lives and our ways of doing things. We want to get rid of all of the hard stuff and we want to do more of the fun stuff. And I think the equation is just not really that sort of black and white at this point in time. So for me, the people factor is really important because AI right now will not replace the thinking of an individual. AI right now is not likely to transform an individual from maybe not a great question asker to an amazing question asker. So it for me, I feel like there is this joint value that can be achieved between a human and AI. I think AI alone sounds great. Humans alone have a lot of promise, but together becomes the key factor in all of that, right? I think we still need to think. We still need to have intuition. We still need to have common sense. And therefore, it's like anything. It's just because you have a Ferrari in the garage doesn't make you a great race car driver.
Yeah, but it helps.
It helps. It does. It gives you a greater opportunity to be. But I think when it comes down to it, like it's still about thinking. Like you still have to turn up to work. You still have to build relationships. You still have to think on your feet. You still have to think abstractly. You still need to make decisions and do things. And at this point in time, AI can support that, but it can't replace that. And, if we think about some of what we see today in terms of what's being built, I think you can definitely spin a great story about the benefit of it. But I think there's a more pressing question about how do I actually use it? And how do I measure the value of it? And how do I make sure that I'm not just trying to outsource something that really doesn't need to be outsourced? Or if I've never built a Ferrari myself in the past, what makes me qualified to build a Ferrari if I have a robot to do it for me or an AI to do it for me? So I think it's that, we talk about hallucinations in AI, we talk about human in the loop, we talk about all of those things, right? And I think that, like people management, the people you manage are only going to be as good as the guidance you give them. And AI is at this point very much the same. And I feel like if it detracts from that, it actually becomes more dangerous than it becomes helpful.
Right. You've mentioned that AI is promising delivers more potential, but it's only one element of the recipe. Okay, Chef Armstrong, if AI is the sriracha of ad tech, What are the other ingredients in your innovation casserole?
Look, I definitely think mindset. So I always like to think about, when I talk about humans and the use of AI, quality versus speed. How do we get the right blend of quality of output versus speed of output? And the human plays obviously the role around quality. But look, I think there's this, everyone talks about common sense not being so common. And I feel like we are in a world now where we can probably we validated that enough. If I think about the people coming through in, the earlier stages of their career, I think there's still this really valuable set of soft skills that I think that recipe can't exist without. You're a problem solver or you're not a problem solver in many cases. You can become a problem solver, but it takes time and effort to get there. You can think different styles of thinking, cognitive diversity. Definitely that the way you think is really, really important. There was an example the other day on LinkedIn where a friend of mine posted something and it was talking about people getting into a certain type of marketing. And their commentary was that they've had a lot of outreach from people who go, where do I start? In my mind, I look at that and go, but that's the wrong question, right? I want people who come to me and go, I want to do this. I've done this research. I've thought about these things. I've mapped from where we are today and what the future looks like. This is what I want to do, and this is how I plan to do it, and this is what I know about it. How do I move that forward? Or do you think that's a great plan? In all of that, and that's for me how I hire and how I bring people in is that thing.
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would get full credit for the meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
Right, soft skills versus hard skills. Soft skills are probably more important. Business acumen, business understanding, technical skill sets can be coached or can be developed over time. So I think that thinking part is really a good part of it. And I think there's a very special or different type of person who's an innovator versus an operator. Many people can come in and keep the ship churning or steaming in the same direction, and then only a few people can come in and go, I reckon we can get to the destination 50% quicker if we make these changes. And I'm bold and brave enough to calculate the risk around what happens if we make those changes, but I'm also very cognizant of the reward if we can get there 50% faster. And I think that starts to also differentiate the innovators from the operators as well, and also thinking about the fact that globally, the hype around AI and the conversation around that has also indirectly or directly, in many cases, led to businesses starting to reduce headcount internally based on the promise that AI brings. But ultimately, within that, we see less and less people willing to kind of step out of the mold and go, you know what, I might be putting my job on the line a little bit here. I might be running some risk that's over and above or slightly different to the appetite of the business, but I'm confident that we can make this work, and if and when we make that work, I'm confident that that'll have longer term impacts on the business over time.
Right. How much do you think that AI is just a convenient way to not have good leadership?
I think that's what it's become, right? Like, I think, when OpenAI kicked off, it feels like forever ago, but it's probably not that long, and it went from 0 to however many users in an incredibly short space of time. I think what happened is you completely removed the barriers to entry or the barriers to access. Overnight or within a short space of time, everybody could access these AI tools. Sign up, give away your email address, maybe pay a little bit of money if you want a slightly more sophisticated setup. And very quickly, the non-technical people, the people who didn't quite understand the technology, became super excited about this new thing. Therefore, everyone just saw it as a silver bullet, right? Or a lot of people saw it as a silver bullet. Well, this can save me, But I think the challenge in that is that it became so accessible that it became very susceptible to being used in the wrong way, thinking about it as delivering the wrong opportunity, and people got wrapped up in the hype of it and lost touch with the realities of business. But then also, I would say, in a lot of cases, alienated those who actually understood the technology and the power of it. And in doing that, the whole piece of AI became very confusing or misleading in terms of where it was landing, the capability it was bringing, and what I could do with it moving forward. And I think we hear a lot these days in the current state of the world that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. I feel like AI has had that same influence.
Right. Eventually, AI is going to become too expensive for everyone. My theory is that people will own their AIs and rent them out to people who can't afford them. Because right now, ChatGPT may cost someone $299, but that's still 10 times more than what it cost just a year ago. And when that costs 10 times more, or 100 times more, people aren't going to be afforded except the rich, and they're going to start leasing out. So maybe upper middle class, you'll lease out your AI to people.
Yeah,
so I also noticed that per Forrester, 53% of marketers say that the AI implementation in their company is underwhelming. Why do you think that is?
I think because it doesn't deliver on the promise, right? I think in many cases, and there's multiple different views on this. One is, do you have the capability in your business to objectively look at the role that AI can play? Are you genuinely exploring opportunities around AI because you have business issues? There was a really good article last year from, I think it was someone out of New Zealand, which talked about AI as a solution looking for a problem. I think AI has created this really interesting challenge or battle between, am I doing AI to drive cost efficiency in my business and improve profitability, and am I compromising my customer experience as a result of it? Is it actually improving the service to my customers? And I think generally it's like anything where, and this has been an ongoing conversation in data and technology for many years, is garbage in, garbage out. If your infrastructure or the ecosystem within your business isn't ready for AI, then you are significantly inhibiting the opportunity for that or those initiatives to succeed. So it's just this case, and I see it, and definitely we have leveraged this and utilized this as part of our business at Mangrove, is that we see people's desire to want to access these things, especially marketers, as an opportunity for us to walk them through what needs to happen from a infrastructural platform baseline readiness point of view to unlock AI. And again, it's a hard conversation to have because a lot of those business leaders within the clients don't want to have that conversation with their leadership or their executive, because that they believe that their opportunity is to present something amazing to their business around AI, promise that it's going to change everything, yet find that it's actually not that straightforward, or that data issue or that data quality issue that we've had in the business in the past is present whether you have AI or not, and AI can help add on top of that over time, but you still need a certain level of quality and readiness to be able to enable that and use that as effectively as you can.
So let's talk a little.
Eric Troutman, the czar of the TCPA, isn't just the guy you call when your phone rings too much. He's the guy you must call. Need to navigate the legal minefield of robocalls, texts, and telemarketing nightmares? Troutman doesn't just give you advice. He hands you a roadmap, a compass, and a do not press this button sign. Practical? Yes. Actionable? Absolutely. And if you're not calling him first, let's be honest, you're probably making a mistake.
A little bit about audio, which is the Rodney Dangerfield of digital advertising, getting no respect, while video struts around like it owns the place. You've said that audio has similarities to video, but is following another path which sounds cryptic, like something a monk would say before teaching martial arts. You've also mentioned something about ubiquitous distribution differences and common technological capabilities. Yoda the Airways, could you decode this for me? Why is audio the dark horse of ad tech? And why should people who've been too busy making TikToks pay attention?
So I'll give you a bit of context to that. So I've been fortunate. I believe they call me a digital native because I've only really worked in my career in digital. I've did a bunch of jobs before.
Me too. I don't even know. I have no idea. People told me I had to learn about real advertising when I started. I never did.
And I didn't aim to fall into advertising. It was just an offshoot of going to university and studying accounting and being a little bit bored with that. But
Yeah, I started a video game company and had to sell ads. That's
There
why.
you go. Worked across display, video, mobile. I was there for nearly every one of the 10 years of the year of mobile. Native advertising, we used to run ads on Hotmail and ads on Skype and MSN Messenger and all of those fun things. You know, I spent 4 years in the latter half of the 2010s, which was, 2016, 2017 to 2020, building video tech. And we built one of the first server-side ad insertion live products on a global basis, and then had a bit of fun traveling the world, talking to video businesses and doing all that. But then transitioned into audio. You know, traditional video, if you talk about a broadcaster, is you must enter a gate where I take your email address, and only then can you access my content. So everyone is logged in, everyone is registered, first-party data coverage is because you technically can't listen to the content without it, and you can only get it in the environments that I make it available in with a gate in front of it. You operate off a vast specification, you have the same workflow where you transform or encode, transcode content, you manage that in a CMS, you distribute that out to platforms, you use ad serving, monetization, dynamic ad insertion, all of those kind of fun things, except you've got multiple pieces of technology in that stack. Audio is a little bit different. Audio is more about, I want to make my content available where the listener is. So that might be a mix of environments that I own and operate where I do have a registration or login in front of it. And it's also going to be a mix of environments where they just take content feeds. So for example, with podcasts, most people listen to podcasts on a Spotify, Apple, or a Google, right? They've got large access to audience, and therefore it makes sense to have your podcasts available on those platforms. The downside of that is you lose an element of control around data collection, your direct one-to-one relationship with the listener, which then in turn flows back into analytics, insights, profitability, monetization. And therefore in audio you still operate off now a VAST protocol since they've decommissioned DAST. You still have the same transcoding, encoding, CMS management, distribution of content, ad serving and SSP or programmatic. The difference just being is that you've got a wide range of very, very different environments your audio content is consumed in, because it's ubiquitous. It doesn't matter what the environment, as long as it can be there and it can be on hand when the listener needs it, versus the video world where it's all sort of locked in your own little mini walled garden.
Are you just trying to tell us that video is more high maintenance than audio?
In some ways it is, but I think that for me, the audio, the uniqueness of audio, especially when you start to talk about the ad tech side of it, monetization, data, it's incredibly fragmented, right? You can find broadcast businesses globally who have both a radio offering, it's streamed digitally, and a podcast offering. Radio, they might have 60-70% of those listeners listening in an environment that they are signed in and registered. The other, and then 95% of their podcasts might be in an environment where they have no first-party data at all. So
I also show that Edison research shows that 74% of podcast listens happens where during activities where video consumption would actually be impossible, such as driving a car, hopefully impossible, hiking and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you would have noticed that in the last few months, you know, Spotify made an announcement last year about adding video podcasts.
Yeah, I know. They just started asking me to add all the clips to it. Like I have to. They want me to add the vertical clips to every single show.
Yeah, but what happens then is that the monetization process becomes a little bit convoluted, right? Because up until a few weeks ago, I think actually earlier this year, there was an announcement about the Spotify video ecosystem. But up until then, you would have to you could distribute your audio podcast. It would automatically be picked up by Spotify. It would present in their catalog. Then if you wanted video, you had to send a separate file directly to Spotify that they would then upload and host, and you couldn't monetize that. Even now, there are monetization capabilities that was announced a couple of weeks ago, but it's still fragmented. If let's say you want to run a sponsorship or an advertisement, which is still a lot of what happens here in Australia, is a lot of advertisers want to do fixed time tenancy sponsorships on specific podcast titles, but then you can only sponsor the audio side of it, because then you've got another partner, which is in this case Spotify and Market, selling video ads that are then running onto your podcast. And then you've got YouTube, which then runs separately under its own ad model as well. So all of a sudden, whether it's Ford, the car brand that's sponsoring that podcast, you've only got the audio version, then something else is playing on the video version, and something else is playing in YouTube. It's slowly starting to fragment even more, which I think is a bit of a red flag for the industry. Most podcast business units run at a relatively slim margin, even if you are producing your own original content. And it's actually, I think, it's making audio more complex in an environment where it is already relatively complex, and it is challenging for those who can't step out of that. I want 100% of my audience to be covered in first-party data.
So why do you think the advertising industry is sleeping on audio advertising? Is it because we're all too visually addicted to stuff we can post on LinkedIn?
I think there's a few reasons. I think diversity of supply has been a really interesting conversation globally. We are working on an initiative here in Australia called the Audio ID, which is a universal ID for the 4 major radio networks across all of their digital audio content. But I think that ultimately it's, direct sales has been relatively good. I think the uptake in programmatic has been slow and compared to other channels. And I think that's because, programmatic is more sophisticated and mature now than it's ever been. And a lot of the teams running the buying in that area, they have great access to more premium content now because more is pushed through the programmatic pipes. But you've also built your operating models for programmatic buying around having a high density of first-party data signals so that you can do targeting, measurement, insights, all of that kind of stuff. And as soon as you start to shift that and someone in your buying group says, oh, let's build audio into that, it starts to fragment a little bit. And you go, well, if I added podcasting in one market, if only 5% of the listeners have first-party data, I'm only going to access that 5% of the audience because the way I trade is this. I have certain goals around margins or profitability or measurement, whatever they may be for your programmatic team. And therefore, it goes into the too hard basket quickly, right? If we think about, and I definitely think that even some of the research that you see talks to it a lot. Measurement, first-party targeting, data, all key reasons why the uptake in programmatic audio hasn't been excessively high. And that, though, is an opportunity. If we think about GDPR, we've been undergoing conversations around regulatory change in the Australian market for 3 to 4 years now, which suggest similar sort of regulations that mirror, if not extend beyond GDPR. Some of what's happening in the landscape in the US and other markets, we're starting to, I guess, venture into this world where first-party data signals are reducing. They are fading or becoming less available, and therefore the opportunity for audio is to solve some of those challenges in a world where no one really ever was used to trading everything on first-party data anyway. And that's why I think audio, in my mind, is a real test ground for those who like to innovate, but those who actually have that opportunity to think slightly differently and kind of put aside the fact that, it's really easy to trade on inventory that has 100% coverage of first-party data signals because I can do everything I want, and then move back into a world where you go, well, how do I produce the same if the coverage of first-party data is 50%, 25%, even maybe less in some cases.
So for someone who's listening to this, who's currently allocating exactly $0 to audio, what is the one thing you tell them that might make them reconsider? What's the elevator pitch for the audio unconverted?
I think you want one-to-one. Someone sitting down with a set of headphones in is one-to-one.
Right.
Like the traditional behavior for a podcast listener is, do you ever sit down with your mates and listen to podcasts? Or are you sitting down by yourself on the train, on your commute, as you run, in your own private time, you and your headphones?
There's no need for a household identity graph, you're basically saying.
I think there's a place for it, but I think it's less important. I think I believe that, one of the forthcoming opportunities is the convergence of audio-video. To an AV style marketplace or environment, and I think there is tangibility there if you can make a link between personal one-to-one listening in the home back to the household. But right now the television is the centerpiece of the household in many, many cases. We've seen growing utilization of smart speakers, but I think for the time being, audio is probably more conducive to one-to-one intimate listening.
So speaking of things that people overcomplicate, you've coined this beautiful term that I'm going to put on a t-shirt, artificial complexity. You said that people make things more complex than need to be, and most of them have no idea that they're doing it. Feels like therapy for the entire ad tech industry.
Yeah, I've toiled with this one for a few years because I believe it was probably a few years ago now, I started trying to start a series on LinkedIn where I wrote content which is all tied to artificial complexity. I feel like if I think about ad tech 10, 15 years ago, which is when I probably first got exposure to it, probably 15 years ago, 2011, I felt like there was a whole lot of people who could talk at length about the technical intricacies of ad tech.
Right.
And I reckon that was nearly 90-10. 90% of the people could, and 10% of the people were sort of, wigging it on top of it and just sort of talking surface level as if they understood it deeply. I feel like over time, this need to try and sell in new technologies or drive the growth of a new innovative business, we've become more and more adept at storytelling and more adept at slightly obfuscating the black and white truth of a technology in lieu
That's what Jeff Green actually said a couple months ago he said people are obfuscating and lying. He said that on Ad Talk. It was actually his quote.
Yeah, I think it's but you experience it, right, when you go to different conferences and events, and I'm fortunate enough that I deeply understand the technical side of it. These days, I think that balance is probably, I reckon, 95% of people talk about ed tech like they know it inside out, and only 5% of people actually do know it inside out. And I've probably also experienced that with some of the tech companies I have engaged with in the last couple of years around a couple of projects that I've been working on, which do slightly, present themselves as quite innovative, but in the context of the market, I believe makes sense. So I feel like, sometimes it's all about trying to sound smart and trying to sound, like your stuff by complicating things for people, whereas at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be that complicated. And I feel like there's this tendency from humans is to go, that sounds too simple. If it's too simple, it sounds too good to be true. It needs to be more complex. How do I make it sound greater? How do we throw in a new acronym? How do we make it sound complex so that people go, wow, this is cool? And we've moved away from selling on business value and just trying to go, well, just bring us in, we'll plug in, maybe we'll generate you 1% extra revenue on a monthly basis. And we get so tied up in it. And even I think about an experience of going to IBC in Amsterdam back in 2023. And I spent a day at that conference just focused on trying to debunk fast video.
Right.
Going to vendors and going, tell me about your fast solution. Oh, we can create you a playlist that can play 24/7 and we can schedule shows. And it's great. Why is that unique? Oh, we can put ads into it. You can do personalized ads. And it's like, well, the technology exists to do personalized ads through SSAI or dynamic ad insertion. What's new about that? Well, if you do that, you can make all this extra revenue. I was like, well, you have the technology to do more. Doesn't guarantee you the demand.
Right.
And then you start to see, when you dig deeply, that no one really understands the demand side of it. They just go, my technology does this and I want to sell to technology people, whereas the conversation is probably more commercial when you just go, well, you're telling me a lot of things that you think you can do, but you're not grounding that and actually understanding how the ad tech ecosystem works. Like, just because I have a piece of technology that can serve ads directly to Tim or make an ad call to an ad server doesn't mean you're going to get an ad that is personalized to Tim. And in reality, there's probably less ad personalization out there than anyone thinks.
Yeah, I'm working now on a story. It's a video product, dynamic insertion, everything. I'm not going to go into it. It's AI based. And it's a great idea. The company's raised, I think they're Series B right now. Yet nobody is using it. And I asked one of their biggest partners how many impressions they sold. And they were like 1,000 last month. It's a great idea. I'm not going to tell you what it is. It will come out soon. But no one uses it. An idea no one needed.
Yeah.
So how much of this is ego-driven architecture?
I think a lot of it is, right. I think that ego-driven architecture, in my interpretation of it, is what it's like what's the saying where they say what gets done gets rewarded, or I can't remember exactly what that is off the top of my head, a bit of a mind blank. But I think that a big part of the industry is about marketing. if you are enough of a personality within the industry and you talk loudly enough about what you're doing, then indirectly that is a form of marketing and it gets attention, right? Like, I mean, the last few weeks, I'm starting to dig deeper into initiatives like AdCP, right? Where conceptually I think there's a really interesting opportunity there, but then realistically I'm kind of looking at it going, okay, but like, how are we doing this? What does it look like? How does it fit within the ecosystem? When do we think we can actually use it? What's the maturity of businesses to be able to use it? And I think that, there's a very smart bunch of people who are part of that initiative. And I think that in itself, not alluding to the fact that some of those people don't probably fall into the egotistical bucket, but it creates a tension because there are so many of those sort of renowned people in that group, right? So I think it generates interest, which then obviously shows promise, which then obviously supports the development of business cases, which then attracts investment. And I think there's a bit of gamification in it, but then I think it's a skill set in itself as well, right? Like we talked about innovation or innovative people earlier on, right? There's a certain subset of people who have a reputation for thinking ahead of the curve, and when they come out and talk about things, people follow.
So what do you think the root cause here is? Is that complexity makes people feel smarter, or that simple solutions don't justify big budgets? Or there's just something structural about how agencies and vendors are incentivized?
Yeah, I think the complexity helps sell, right? I think people get so overwhelmed by things sometimes and they go, this is just great, I need to have it, or there's so much noise around it, I need to buy it. And sometimes, like if you're on the client side, you may be talking to someone who is a decision maker, but they may not be the people who are going to use the platform or use the solution or implement the solution around it. I think people generally steer away from simplicity because there's also that sounds boring part of it, right? And we do a lot of stuff that people would probably consider sometimes as boring at Mangrove, but that's our philosophy around how we build the ecosystem that then creates the ability to innovate and develop new capability off the back of it. So I think that, complexity sells because there'll be people who just are so impressed, even though they don't understand, who just go, I want it, I need it, it sounds cool, we want to be the first company, we want to lead the market, we want to get a step up on our competitor, we'll figure out how we do it or what we do with it later. And we work a lot in the customer data platform space, and there's been a lot of that in the past in terms of bringing on platforms that sound amazing and have all these cool bells and whistles, but then become impractical to use in reality, and then create tension internally between stakeholders and the CFO or the executives.
So let's shift gears a little bit. We're going to strand you on an island, no Zoom calls, no dashboards, no AI tools, just sands, coconuts, the existential dread of no Wi-Fi. You've chosen 5 companions: Ed Stafford, the survival expert; Rhys Darby, the comedian; Elon Musk, your best mate Kendall; and Dave Grohl, the drummer, right?
Yeah.
Dave Grohl's a drummer, right? Got that right.
Well,
Foo Fighters, right? Took me a second.
Foo Fighters singer.
But he was the drummer for Nirvana, that's why.
Yeah.
Am I right? Yeah, been a while. This is either the beginning of the greatest reality show or the setup for a strange joke. Walk me through it. Why these 5?
Well, I thought about the fact that you don't know how long you're going to be on that desert island, and you want to make that probably as enjoyable as you can, but you need a balance of people, right? So if you've got Ed Stafford there,
right? Are you also going naked, or is that just his option?
I was going to say that we would be closed. That would, There's no nakedness here.
I have a note that he survived naked on a desert island for 60 days. Obviously, utility choice.
Yeah. So I think ultimately you need to eat and you need shelter. So
right.
Who better to have there with you than someone who's going to be able to figure out the lay of the land in terms of what's edible, what's not edible, where we get our food sources from. Someone who's probably going to have a good idea around building shelter and all of that stuff. So that stuff's taken care of it. I chose Rhys Darby as well. He's a New Zealand comedian who I really enjoy. So you're on a desert island, stranded, need a little bit of lighthearted entertainment. And I think that, someone like that is someone who can read a situation well, is going to be able to keep the morale of the team high until rescue, should that ever come. obviously just a wealth of knowledge and interesting. You might as well learn some things while you're out there. I'm sure he's got some really interesting stories as well. He's got a very interesting perspective on things, but every time I see him speak, regardless of sometimes how that comes out, you see that calculator ticking in his head, or that mind just sort of going 100 miles an hour. So I think, without any books or television or any of that kind of stuff, he's probably someone who's got a unlimited wealth of knowledge that he can impart.
So question about Rhys Darby. What role does humor play in your life, and what made you think, if I'm going to be stranded indefinitely, I need this guy?
I think just there's the nostalgic part of it, that he's a Kiwi.
Right. Oh, right.
I think that,
But he plays the world's most incompetent manager.
Yeah. But that's it. He's like the man of 1,000 characters, right? So I feel like, important to be entertained, important to laugh. I think laughing is for the use of the phrase, great medicine. And I think that, someone who can be jovial in a very serious situation in the right way, can inadvertently lift the morale of everyone around you. And I think that's also important in, one of your key challenges when you would be stuck in a scenario like that is remaining optimistic. We will be saved, we will be found, we will